Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. I've already warned Dan that I'm going to talk about his car. So be warned. This afternoon, I would like to speak about what a work of architecture is in the way that it's thought, and how it becomes something that enters a sort of mystical property and differentiates it from being a ordinary building, but rather a carriage for thought. In the most general terms, and I know that those great critics sitting on the front row will raise their eyebrows, but architecture has all sorts of protagonists. And the one that begins with a capital A is really a piece of philosophical intent. It situates a way of looking at the world that hasn't necessarily happened before. And then there are those architects who understand that, but go ahead and make it happen all over the world, the country, and in the provinces. And then there is that group of architecture about which Michelangelo writes so eloquently, that build from the heart, with the tradition, and with the knowledge. I'm not really interested in the highfalutin cosmopolitan ideas. So New Harmony in this photograph has that vernacular on the rail. And then it has this other thing in the back. So what is it? Michelangelo has already spoken about Villa Savoy, the great piece of purist thought of Le Corbusier. And in these two slides, you'll see that there is a ticking mind in an art practice that either paints or makes collages and wonders about a way that the world could go together in their art without the responsibilities of doing the building. So, for example, here in this small sketch of the Athenaeum, right at its beginning, when there was a restaurant up on the top and something else over to the left, you can see that there is an interest in seeing a human being, but in all sorts of ways and all sorts of planes and all sorts of forms. So Richard Meyer, who hung out with painters, in fact, shared a studio with Stella, was in this world of seeing the world afresh. So you see these little quotations of a Mondrian painting serving as kind of this room that we're sitting in. And along with his colleagues, starting in '75 and going on onwards, Colin Rowe was the great critic and originator of an attitude towards building, and they produced this concept of a city that was made out of pieces, that it was no longer the authoritarian, modernist, rank buildings down 7th Avenue in New York, but instead a kind of messy place. So Richard Meyer was working in a milieu of architectural thinkers who saw the world, who saw history, who saw communities, who saw towns as a place where thought drifted at different velocities, at different speeds, at different forms, and came into oneness. That is the essence of this building. But he was not afraid of touching on our long tradition. And as Kent Schutte so carefully observed, the room that we are sitting in right now is actually based upon the Golden Mean rectangle. I'm not saying that this is why it feels so good in here, but it certainly doesn't do any harm. In other words, there is a long tradition in this building whereby there is a sense of the nuttiness of everyday life as the collage, and then the tranquility of a principle that is about as long, well, we've already invoked God. He actually made that spiral. That was a joke, but that's okay. It's funny, you know, different audiences. Here you see the plan of the Athenaeum with the research center, which is, you can see it over there. It doesn't exist, of course, but the Athenaeum was a big complex of places of thinking, of places of change, and places of introduction. And we have here in town a full set of all of the many sets of drawings of the Athenaeum. So I'd like to just talk about the Athenaeum as an instrument of looking. This wonderful drawing of New Harmony that shows the river on the left, a skinny path to the Athenaeum, a parking lot beneath it, the graveyard beneath that of a harmonist, leading to the pottery studio, leading to the roofless church, and then the hotel. Here is the vision that Maya sets up for us. That he has made this building as a hinge between these periods of time, forests, orchards, rivers, nature, lakes, towns, and time. But the issue here is that when Maya made this building, he saw it as a crystal adrift, held by sinuous, spider-thin links to the river, to the town, and to the parking lot. He never meant it to be anything other than something to walk around and have your body engaging viscerally. And of those three paths, this is the first path. The one that is intact is the path to the town. And it is this, it's good for one person, maybe a half, but it is a very straight run that allows you to tumble out of the building and in towards the town. And very early on, it was gated, very, very early, right at the beginning of the 80s. The second path is my favorite. And that's the one that leads out of the buildings, or if you are on a boat, into the building, and it just runs off into the trees. But as you go down, things get problematic. Jane Owen, in her enthusiasm, made a monument to the Girl Scouts and plugged the path so that that journey from the river and to the building was inadvertently stopped in its tracks. But fortunately, the oil spill workshop were here this week, and with their machinery, slashed and burned and ripped all the weeds from the river to the Girl Scouts. So now we can get a sense of what that lovely reciprocity is between the Athenaeum and the river. So this is an instance whereby the concept that the architect has to make a spider-thin thread between a river and a building is inadvertently broken, and therefore the meaning of the building and the circulation is hurt. There's that path, there's that philanthropist boat that is at the end of that path. And now, because of this forest, because of this stone, it no longer exists. But with a chainsaw and a crowbar, all of that could change. And I would encourage any of us to get out there and pull the motor. The third path, up at the top left, is the path that leads to the Athenaeum from the parking lot. And up until a year or two ago, it had a width which suggested a golf cart, but basically it was for feet. And along the path with these towers, much like the columns in the building, with gridded cages up at the top that slowly let you walk up the tower, or walk up the path. And in a very well-meaning gesture, the path was widened by, let's say, 3 feet. And suddenly, the whole meaning of the building changes. And the lights no longer are these sentinels that lead you and guide you up to the top. So that today, whereas used to be that the building had this soft yellow glow to it, now the lights are in your eyes. And this is one of those moments where architecture preservation moves and steps in and calls foul. And it is for us, as preservationists, historians, and designers, to be able to articulate what these issues are really all about. So there's the great path, the new path, and then here are my 2 favorite cars. Okay, Eli Lilly, all right, we get it, the roller. And then, of course, the black and white gala today. Dan, you could do this too, that's fine. So this whole question of how you read a building, what its engagement is with people and politics and so forth is really important. So let's talk about the building. When I interviewed Richard Meyer, he said, well, you know, it's not really for anything, this building. It's really a device, an instrument with which you can walk through and over and under and beside. And the door here, by the way, has 2 entrances. There's a little one and a big one. In other words, it's a machine to look at the town. So when you come off your boat and walk up to the town, there is this gradual tumble of stairs that you stagger into the building in. And then when you get to it, on the right-hand side, you see a cantilever, a big form right in front of you that you will be on, that there could be somebody on. In other words, the building introduces humans in all sorts of means. And likewise, that ramp travels up and is wide enough. It's pre-ADA, quite an early piece of handicap accessibility. Then another kind of stairs is that kind of soft carpet, such as we find here. And one of my favorites on the right-hand side is standing at the top of those stairs and watching the stairs tumble down and rip up over the screen. And so you have this sense that the building journeys your eye, journeys your sensibility. Even this screen is a masterstroke because it is the only thing in this building which is a flat rectangle. In other words, even the screen becomes part of the architecture. These seats, another remarkable stairway. The seats, what are they? They are the carpet that sort of got crazy and pushed out of itself to make this rippling series of stairs, and then there's this ramp beside it. Don't miss the spiral staircase. It is inside the building? No. It's outside the building? No. It's upside, it's downside. You never know what that thing is. In other words, the architect is allowing you to have this emotional gesture to the sky or down to the ground. Similarly with these all too wonderful naval references of a ship's gantry. In fact, the building is really a boat. And you are the captain as you stand up there. This is, for those people not from town, this is our annual Nile-like inundation of water that comes right to the edge. And it's a wonderful experience. Another thing, and this is a quotation from Meyer that we read, Meyer, he never sees his buildings as white. He says, no, they're full of color. It's just what the color is reflected from. So even in this building, the kind of softness of the way the light starts hard and then goes gray in the corner, that's the architecture. The shadows of the architecture. This yellow from the sunshine in the evening, that's the color, that's the architecture. What I like about this building is that, and it's difficult to have this, but fortunately we can be asked very, very politely. It's something that you walk through, it's something that you walk across, it's something you walk down, and it is also something that you walk over. And up on the top, there used to be a whole field of Japanese garden-like white stones. But the kids would go up there, throw the stones, smash the windows, and hey, we lost it. So in any kind of form of architectural preservation, in order to have this raised garden, not Japanese anymore, but maybe there's a moss garden that would work, you could have sedum, as Kent Schutte so acutely pointed out. In other words, the meaning of the building is maintained. And in architectural preservation, there is the fabric of what needs to get done to make sure that you don't get sued, and then there is the meaning of the building, so that the heart is lifted to the place that the building was intended to take it to. And I love these stairs. They are, I need to get out of Dodge super fast. And this is the escalier that rips you down to the street and then rips you up again. On the left is another fantastic photograph. It's super fuzzy, you can hardly see it, but there are 50, 60 people crawling all over the building. And this is probably right after it opened, because the gate was put on extremely early in the history of the building. But you can get this sense that the Athenaeum is this instrument for looking at New Harmony. And that you would peep out, and you'd see views, and you'd see poles, and you'd see the river, and you'd see trees, the birds, the this, the that. And that's what our building is. And so we have now a sort of moment that is wistful for me, whereby those people aren't up there anymore. In other words, the building doesn't really work according to the intentions that it was. And this amazing ramp that is so thin and so illegal and so outrageously just wrong. And so this is a concept I'd like to bring in about the notion of incremental degradation. And by that I mean that a decision is made and then that becomes the normal. Then the decision is made again, which was normal, and it changes. And so ultimately you get this time when you get further and further away from the vision of the originating artist. But this is not simple at all. And here are some free plans of Richard Meyer and the client struggling to put an elevator in the building. And so you see a square one, and then you see a smush one, and then you see a long one, and then you don't see it in the final building. But the issue here is that the elevator was considered, and I know that there is a plan to think about an elevator for the building today, but for him, I would say the elevator was really another way of movement. It's like a John Portman building, casino in Las Vegas, where you get in the glass elevator and you go ripping up and you just see the world, the lobby, the discos, or whatever it is, get smaller and smaller as you go up to the penthouse or first floor. And it's similarly with the bathrooms. Meyer spent a lot of time on these bathrooms. And as you watch the development of the building, and I know that they're shitty drawings, no pun intended, you will see that they get more and more room, and the way that they're organized, and the doorways are organized, and ultimately the men's doorway and the women's doorway are a good long way apart, not like the early version where you might get completely confused. And even the place of the handicapped toilet is thought about. Should it be against the wall, or should it be one bay in? And for the architecture heads in the building, see, Aaron is already giggling. If you want to understand an architect's work, the first place you go is above. Because in that building, the architect distills all their thought into the most elemental form. So, for example, in the boys' side, there is a neon light up at the top against the wall. It's exactly the same thing that you have in this building. Everywhere you go. The way that the walls hover off the ground, they don't go down to the bottom. Only in a Maya building would that be. That the fittings are very sculptural objects which work when you look at these collages. So for architecture preservationists, if you start messing with the urinals, you destroy the building. But of course, this is ridiculous. Even the handicap rails, now those are the same rails that Maya uses on the whole building, which is basically a symphony of rails. Way too big, all the way in the back. But this is where it really all gets going. So Schwartz, who was really an equal partner with Maya, Ralph Schwartz, an extraordinary human being, was a soldier at the back of the Bulge, was a soldier lawyer at the Nuremberg, I don't know if he was a lawyer, but he was at the Nuremberg trial. He saw a lot in his life. He was the artistic director, planning director of the Ford Foundation, came here and then worked with Maya over in the largest arts building project, the Getty Center. In fact, in these chairs, the decision to build the Getty Center was made. And the table which goes with the chairs is where the fists thump the tables and so forth. So Schwartz didn't get everything he wanted, most of it. But one of the things that I really lament is that this place on the model, on the plan for a model of the phalanstery was never built. Now, what is the phalanstery? Phalanstery, when Robert Owen bought this town, it was a holding pattern for his community whilst he built this enormous city on the hill for 2,000 people, which is for which we understand that 250,000 bricks were made, and then the whole thing went belly up. The issue here is that the town and the architecture and this building have this long and convoluted and complex connectivity. And so that the building becomes an instrument whereby you can come to these things. Okay, incremental degradation. I don't want to spoil the building for you, but I probably will. When you walk down the ramp this evening, when you get to the part that projects over the atrium, you will see two industrial, agricultural, weird columns that are welded to the building and the stairs. And I've done everything I can to find the drawings of these. They're not in the original plans, but they were in the photographs of Ezra Stoller and Fujikawa, which means that this projection, which should be this floating form that introduces you right in the middle of the world, wobbles like hell. And someone said, we can't have this. And so they welded it shut. Now, for me, this is the first, you can see, there it is, that column, that bendy, round column. It has nothing to do with the building whatsoever. I can feel, just feel the engineers getting this, and we can fix this. We'll have it done by one o'clock. So, for architecture, these two pieces of steel basically destroyed the concept of the freeness and openness and generosity of an ever-moving circulation. And then, of course, my new favorite, this is an Andy Warhol sculpture in the, actually it's the side of a Coke machine, but it's the Coke machine in the shop. Wow. How did they pull it off? You know, the beauty of this building is that it has these essential gifts. There are 3 bowls of water. Coca-Cola did this to the whole thing. So for architectural preservation and the people who really care about how vision is maintained, to have a 8-foot bottle of Coca-Cola facing you in the Richard Meyer building of the new Army Athenaeum is so paradoxical, it is funny. And this is my other favorite. What am I to say? It's the little theater that reminds me of Harry Potter, the cupboard underneath the stairs. So you have this beautiful form, which has the golden mean in it, my goodness. And then, what do we see? Harry Potter beneath the stairs. So, even the tiles, I mean, if you go up to the balcony, and please don't, it's way too dangerous. The tiles are, Meyer was, I don't know where he was when he was thinking about those tiles, because they are shattered. But the tiles maintain the integrity of the building. The tiles are at parallel to the 45-degree facade on the west. So when you walk on these tiles, you have this shift going 45 degrees that takes you there. In other words, even the tiles speak to the principles of the building. The tiles beneath the spiral staircase are made of rubber, bouncy. And they have a pattern that has nothing to do with the grid of the building. In other words, we need, as a community, to have, what do I say? I mean, Aaron has been lambasted for being I've been reading your Wikipedia entry for being an elitist, and all of this good stuff. But I believe that the sense of really understanding what is engaged with these small details is of great importance, and that together we can all work together. The signage, again, delicious. I've counted the words in this building. Exit. Men, I presume women were put up there, but maybe not. And then the museum shop. That's the 3 words in this building, 4 words in this building. By what? By Vignelli. Vignelli is the text, the graphic designer. So Vignelli, Aaron will fill you in, but these are the top designers of the time, and that script is so kindly. It's like, I beg you to go there. Now, on the other hand, this is not an advertisement for the play No Exit, but it could be. But everything counts. Everything means something. And so when you read on the door, "Welcome to Posey County," this is not exactly a modernist experience. So you have to ask the question whether that sign in wonderful serif like that on the front door, whether it belongs on a modernist building of this caliber. Do you put lipstick on the Mona Lisa to make her look pretty? Not gonna happen. So, this is a difficult conversation, I know that, but I would like to propose a few ideas that we preserve the intention of the building. That we deal with issues of safety, but we deal with it with the original architects so that they can make the reading. That any kind of discussion, even for sanding the floor, because there's a big discussion as to whether you sand the floor of a building or whether you maintain its ever-changing gloss. These are important buildings, important discussions. And an academic conference will lay it all out and have it back and forth, and then you can have that for peer review. And then also to familiarize everybody, with the Venice Charter of Historic Preservation. I don't know if that's the word of it, Michelangelo, but it's good enough. But it's the kind of document that says, if you have a visitor center, you don't turn it into a casino. If you have a dormitory, you make it for lodging and for people. And in other words, you preserve not only the building and the fabric, but you preserve the intentions. And luckily, Michelangelo is a key member of Docomomo that takes so much care of modernist buildings, and then once again to work with the original firm. Because they know the philosophy that was made that brought the building into being, and they partner with the local architect so that everybody gets a piece of the pie, and also whatever. And I think what is the most difficult thing for us as a town is to understand that we have a work of art here. And it's difficult, and it costs a lot more money to maintain a work of art than it does a garage at the end of the driveway. And it demands a different level of care. It's a project of extraordinary, philosophical, dare I say the word, intention in order to get it right. And here is one of the great ideas of my dear friend Tom Williams, probably the most sensible idea of what to do with the building that anybody has come up with. And I showed this to Richard Meyer, and he smiled and shook his head. Actually, that's a complete lie. It didn't happen. So finally, Richard Meyer, complicated person. And this recent photograph of the man in two forms of the shadow and the pair of glasses that look out, that both shield and make more acute. We have this conundrum in our building, and it is not easy. It's not easy at all. So please know that Richard Meyer was contacted for the conference, and he sends his very good wishes, which you will see in the catalog, and that he loves this building, and as he writes, it's just a question of time when he comes back to pay us a visit. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ben.